Hello, my name is Denisa and I live in Timișoara, Romania. I listen to Bible Believers Fellowship and praise God because this ministry has helped me a lot understand sound Bible doctrine.
Join us at bbfohio.com and bbfohioradio.com. Welcome to Bible Believers Fellowship and the ministry of bbfohio.com and this study in Psalm 18, covering verses 15 through 19. We're going verse by verse through the Psalms, a study that may be cut off by the rapture, but as long as the Lord tarries and leaves us here, we will continue our careful, thoughtful look at these wonderful Psalms, verse by verse, the way God gave them. If you have any questions, comments, or prayer requests, you can send those to our attention by email. Send those to bbfohio@protonmail.com. If you'd like to send a letter, you can use U.S. Postal, and you can send any check or money order contributions to support this ministry by addressing those to Bible Believers Fellowship, P.O. Box 662, Worthington, Ohio 43085. You can also make donations at bbfohio.com using the PayPal button on the right-hand side of the screen on the desktop, or you can use the drop-down menu if you're on the mobile site, bbfohio.com. And now we begin our study of Psalm 18, verses 15 through 19. This is part 1 of 2. Current events update before we get into our Bible study. Orwellian liberals using their positions of power to control thought and speech. This is all part of the Antichrist system to come. This is from Christian Headlines. Facebook CEO, who is Mark Zuckerberg, admits to clear bias in blocking pro-life videos. I didn't see that on any normal mainstream TV news. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg has admitted clear bias in blocking pro-life group Live Action's videos. That's the name of the group, Live Action, saying it was wrong to censor. CBN News reported that late last week in a meeting with the social media giant's executive and Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri, and Lila Rose, founder and CEO of the pro-life group called Live Action, confronted Zuckerberg over the mistake. In a meeting today with Missouri, this is a quote, in a meeting today with Missouri Republican Josh Hawley, Mark Zuckerberg said Facebook was wrong to censor me, that's Rose, Lila Rose there, and Live Action, that there was clear bias and that the fact checkers were activists, end quote. And that's what you need to understand. The so-called fact checkers, including Snopes, they're leftist activists. They're not about the truth. And your news media, 9 out of 10, and I'm being very conservative, I think, saying that, 9 out of 10 in the news, our so-called news media, are activists. When you ask them why they went into journalism, they don't say, because of the story. I just want to tell the story. I want to get the news to people. I want them to know the truth about what's happening. That's not their purpose is to make a difference. And they think making a difference is promoting the leftist agenda. Despite the admission of guilt, Facebook did not apologize for the mistake. Yeah. Nor for telling thousands of Live Action followers that the nonprofit was false news. Zuckerberg did express his concern about the mistake, however. He's just not going to apologize. So, and the bottom line is that the censorship involved 2 pro-life videos that underwent a, quote, fact check. Now listen to this. The videos claim that abortion is not medically necessary. And that's a fact. The old thing about, well, in the life of the mother, I've always told people, if you could really guarantee that abortion would only take place when the life of the mother was truly in jeopardy, there would be no abortions. If that was the only exception. But the problem is they would start saying every woman with the hiccups needed an abortion, because that's how dishonest they are. But the fact is, it's never medically necessary. The independent fact-checking board included Robin Schickler and Daniel Grossman, both who support abortion. What a shock that they would censor those videos. Schickler said in her evaluation that, quote, all reasons for deciding to seek abortion care are valid. No one reason is better than another, end quote. In other words, she doesn't care about the facts. She's an activist. And she's accomplished to murder, accessory to murder. In the meantime, evangelicals are so scared, and evangelical preachers are so scared, they're cowards, and they're scared to death that people are going to call them right-wingers or say that they're Trump supporters. Well, I'm here to tell you that I support anybody who stands up for what's right. And as long as Donald Trump is standing up for what's right, he's got my support. I want to say something about this. There's some people who will say, he's supporting the sodomites or he's supporting LGBTQ. The only thing Donald Trump is doing is what every Christian should do. And that is stand up against killing people. He is saying that the Muslims and communists who are killing people because they're homosexual are wrong. Tossing homosexuals off of buildings, for example, it's wrong. It's not a New Testament doctrine for us to kill them. We're supposed to preach to them, pray for them. We don't accommodate their sin. We make them very angry when we take our stand. But that's as far as it goes. We don't kill them. And President Trump has taken a stand on that issue, and he's being lied about, even by some people who call themselves Christians. And he is fighting for our freedoms, including our battle for free speech and the free practice of religion, as guaranteed in the First Amendment, in the face of these social media giants, as we call them.
Freedom and democracy must be constantly guarded and protected, both abroad and from within. We must always be skeptical of those who want conformity and control. Even in free nations, we see alarming signs and new challenges to liberty. A small number of social media platforms are acquiring immense power over what we can see and over what we are allowed to say. A permanent political class is openly disdainful, dismissive and defiant of the will of the people. A faceless bureaucracy operates in secret and weakens democratic rule. Media and academic institutions push flat-out assaults on our histories, traditions, and values. In the United States, my administration has made clear to social media companies that we will uphold the right of free speech. A free society cannot allow social media giants to silence the voices of the people, and a free people must never, ever be enlisted in the cause of silencing, coercing, canceling, or blacklisting their own neighbors.
Amen. If Barack Obama had made that speech, I'd played it just the same. But he didn't. And back when I was in Cincinnati, I remember Bill Clinton signed legislation to protect religious freedoms. And I told everybody they should support that and thank God for it. Wasn't a whole lot Bill Clinton ever did that we could thank God for and support, but when you can, you can. So, as I said, few in either political party are willing to stand. My congressman is Steve Stivers. He's a Republican. Sadly disappointed in him. Just The man is either a coward or he's paid off. He will not speak up. The only time he's ever spoke up about Trump is when he can join the sheeple and say bleh about something they didn't like. It's just sick. It's sad. And I believe they're corrupt hirelings with no real moral courage, no matter what they say in their political ads. That talk is cheap. I want to see you take a real stand. All right, so that's our current events update. The stage is being set for the Antichrist. And the deep state is fighting tooth and nail to take us into the New World Order. And in Psalm 18, we left off with verse 14. And this is all about what's about to happen when Jesus returns. Mainly, it's talking about what happens at the end of the tribulation. So what we're reading about in Psalm 18, we'll begin in verse 15 tonight, could be as close as a little more than 7 years away. I always think of that. When you're reading about the rapture, it could happen any moment. When you're reading about the second coming, 7 years plus a little if the rapture happened right now. So I love to put it in those terms. Psalm 18, begin with verse 15. I'm just going to ask you to read the odd numbers with me, beginning with verse 15. Then the channels of waters were seen, and the foundations of the world were discovered at thy rebuke, O Lord, at the blast of the breath of thy nostrils. He sent from above. He took me. He drew me out of many waters. He delivered me from my strong enemy and from them which hated me, for they were too strong for me. They prevented me in the day of my calamity, but the Lord was my stay. He brought forth also into a large place. He delivered me because he delighted in me. All God's people say amen. We established the context of these verses in the previous study as the second coming of Jesus Christ. And if you look again there, verse 7 talks about it says the earth shook and trembled, the foundations also of the hills moved and were shaken because he was wroth. There went up a smoke out of his nostrils and fire out of his mouth devoured. Coals were kindled by it. And then it says, verse 9, he bowed the heavens also and came down. That's a reference to the second coming. And darkness was under his feet. And we discussed all these things, and we showed how they refer to what's going to happen at the time of the second coming. And verse 15 continues the narrative of God's wrath being poured out on an unbelieving world. And we know at the time, just a reminder, go back to Psalm 2. Psalm 2. There's a whole lot of prophecy about the second coming and about the stage being set. Psalm 2. Why do the heathen rage and the people imagine a vain thing? If you missed that, you can go online and listen. We talked about how that's such a perfect picture of what's taking place right now. The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, and that's the whole New World Order without Israel. Let us break their bands asunder and cast away their cords from us. They're sick of us, folks. They're sick of the Bible. They don't hate you, they hate Jesus, but they do hate you. But they hate you because Jesus said they hate you because they first hated me. They hate you because you have Jesus in you. They hate you because you keep repeating the words of Jesus. And Jesus is really, really scared. He's real worried. It says in verse 4, he that sitteth in the heavens shall do like Doug. Laugh. The Lord shall have them in a derision, then shall he speak unto them in his wrath and vex them in his sore displeasure. And on. Read verse Read Psalm 2 sometime as a reminder if you haven't lately. And that's what's going on here. It's payday. Time has come. God's wrath is being poured out. Verse 15 says, "Then the channels of waters were seen, and the foundations of the world were discovered at thy rebuke, O Lord, at the blast of the breath of thy nostrils." Now this isn't talking about a global deluge like Noah's flood. Why? Why do we know that, Johnny?
He already promised he wasn't going to destroy the earth with water again.
And what was the token of that promise?
The rainbow was seven.
Isn't that something?
Seven.
And you see that rainbow that's 6 for the sodomite movement, but you also see it in other places, and they all talk about how the rainbow speaks of unity. No, it doesn't. God says it's a reminder that I once wiped all of you except for one family out, and the next time will be by fire. That's the rainbow. So the power of God is overwhelming, and this is not the first time we've seen it. Obviously, we just referred to one, but the Genesis gap, you go back to Genesis chapter 1, and it starts out saying, "In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth." And then verse 2 says, "And the earth was without form and void." And we don't believe God created it that way. We believe something happened to put it in that condition. And I believe it's described in Jeremiah 4, if you want to turn there. Isaiah, Jeremiah. And people will say, I'm going the wrong direction. People will say, well, I think this is talking about the judgment of God during the tribulation period. But he's using the judgment of the Genesis gap as a reminder of what will happen when God pours out his wrath. Jeremiah 4, 23 and 24, we'll focus in on. It'll sound familiar. Read verse 23 with me. "I beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form and void, and the heavens, and they had no light." Now, that remind you of verse 2 of Genesis 1, right? Read verse 24. "I beheld the mountains, and lo, they trembled, and the hills, and all the hills moved lightly." I've never seen that. Have you ever seen that? No. They say if you see the hills moving like that, run. And it'll actually cause liquefaction of solids. And quicksand is an example, but it would be quicksand the size of Franklin County, sucking everything in. Yeah, John. And on the fly here, I'm going to see if I can bring something up, but that's what they claim to have found. They claim to have found a lost continent, but it's real close to and connected to the Horn of Africa. I thought it was in there a little better. And you see Africa there, and then Eurasia, they're calling it, because part of Europe was underwater. But what they say is that it's underneath the ocean, and like how many? 7,000 miles underneath the, let's just click on the link and see what I can, like 7,000 miles underneath the Earth's crust. But here's the problem. It says the research published in Gondwana Research notes that the continent was part of North Africa and eventually settled under southern Europe. Jim had that right. More than 200 million years ago. Now there's the problem, is they don't really know that. They just make it up. And they'll give you this long explanation for why they say that, but it's one conjecture piled upon another, and you end up with dozens of conjectures, which then they say, and did they say it that way? A lot of times what they'll say is it may have been 200 million years ago. You know, that kind of thing. But what I believe what they're seeing is one of two events. They're seeing the remnants of either what happened to make the earth without form and void, or they're seeing what happened at the flood, of Noah's flood, which would only be about 4,000 years ago. So, or not 4,000, where were we at? 6,000. Yeah. Whoops. We're coming up on the end of 6,000. So, I think it was right about then. Am I right? I don't have my dates in my... yeah. Anyway, it wasn't 200 million. And you really do have to just reject what the Bible says and take man's word, and I'm just not prepared to do that. So go back to Psalm 18 now with that in mind. That's one of the instances of, or actually we're not going to go back to Psalm 18. I want to stay in Genesis. Genesis 7, just to look real quick. I want to look at that where it does talk about the Noahic flood. Genesis 7 verses 11 and 12. I'm going to read the first part of that verse. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, the 17th day of the month. You see where I'm at? Yeah. Read with me. The same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were open. I don't think that's talking about something like, what's up there at Yellowstone, Old Faithful. It's not talking about water just going, The fountains were broken up. I think you're talking about massive geological change taking place. People say, oh, we're going to find the Garden of Eden. No, you're not. It was destroyed. I mean, first there was an angel, a cherub, I should say, a cherub with a flaming sword. Whoa, 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 you ain't going in there. And at some point, maybe right up to the flood, the Bible never says the angel ever went AWOL. And I don't know what happened, an angel, not like he's got something better to do. So he could have been there from the time of the fall to the time of the flood. But we know that after the flood, no garden. Now, I believe that the promised land is the Garden of Eden. We'll see the borders here in a little bit. But I don't believe it's the original garden. But I believe that's the area where it was at. That's a whole other story, but another study. But look at verses 18 through 20. It also says, and the waters prevailed and were increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark went upon the face of the waters. And the waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth, and all the high hills that were under the whole heaven were covered. 15 cubits upward did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered. And I believe that means that you take the tallest mountain, and the water was 15 cubits above that. Now, I'm not an expert on this, and I didn't take the time to look it up for exact figures, but I know that a person can only go down so far into water before you just pop.
You can only go so high for air to breathe that you get up in the
You get the bends. Well, but we're talking about water here under the water. James Cameron was the guy who made Avatar, right? And he went down in a submarine as deep as any man has ever gone. And when he got there, he started to flip out. The pressure, even though he was in a pressurized sub, he could hear it creaking and cracking and everything. And he said his mind just started to go. And he had to get out of there. But of course, he had to do it at a certain rate or he would have been killed. Now, that kind of pressure on the earth at the time that the fountains of the deep were broken up and all this pressure from this water is all reshaping everything on the planet. Everything. Take some time to do a little research on that to grasp what happened at Noah's flood. We think, we think that there's some. The Grand Canyon, I believe, is an example of what I'm talking about.
You can't look at the Grand Canyon and not know there's a flood out.
The Grand Canyon carved that thing out in a matter of, the major changes took place during the 40 days and 40 nights, but there was constant changes because when we're talking about the erosion of the floodwaters receding everything, you're not talking about just even these floods from these hurricanes. I mean, you're talking about something that we can't even imagine. And anyway, that's what we're talking about in Psalm 18. In Psalm 18, when he's describing what's going to happen when Jesus returns, that's the kind of thing we're talking about. It's big stuff. And that's why I remind you, as you read, don't leave skid marks on your Bible. People read through the Bible and it's just like, slow down and think about what you're reading. And grasp what it is you're being told here. The channels of water were seen, the foundations of the world were discovered at thy rebuke, O Lord, at the blast of the breath of thy nostrils. These judgments resulted in cataclysmic changes to the geological landscape of the earth. Things that are just, we can't even imagine. Verse 16, he sent from above, he took me. Do you know there's going to be a rapture when Jesus returns? Our rapture at the beginning or before the tribulation, we go up and meet him in the air, and then we go from here to the edge of the universe in a thought. We're going to be, it'll be faster than if you took a wormhole. Even though we don't know if wormholes actually even do that. But what science fiction has described as a wormhole and traveling and all that, this will be even faster. But this time, this rapture, he's going to gather the Jews from wherever they are, and I believe that a lot of them are just going to run and drive whatever vehicle they have, or horses or whatever, from Petra to Jerusalem. But the rapture of gathering the believers and everything, he's going to bring them to Jerusalem from all over the world, because there's going to be a judgment. The sheep and the goats. That's all going to happen at this time. And he says, he sent from above, he took me, he drew me out of many waters. Now, I believe this also pictures what we studied in Revelation 12. Look over there real quick. Revelation chapter 12, we studied this a few moons ago. That's how Elizabeth Warren's people would say it. A few moons ago, right? She met one of the chiefs and said, I believe I'm a Native American. He said, how? Revelation 12, 14 to 17. We're not going to read the whole chapter. But it says, and to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place. Remember that? And we believe that's Petra. Where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time. That's 3.5 years. From the face of the serpent. This is when the serpent has come to the earth, possessing the Antichrist and trying to destroy Israel. Verse 15, and the serpent cast out of his mouth what? Just like we're reading in Psalm 18. As a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away.